Hello, my name is Matthew, and yesterday I finished reading Les Miserables by Victor Hugo, and this is translated by Christine Donahuer. And the reason that I took up the challenge of reading Les Miserables again, this was my third time. I read it in my early 20s, and then I read it cover to cover again in my early 30s, and now I read the whole thing again in my early 40s. There are some passages that over the decades now I've gone back to, especially the first part of this book, which I'll get into. But the reason that I decided to pick up this monument was because last year someone had told me about this book, The Mysteries of Paris by Eugene Sue, and I looked into the book, and The Count of Monte Cristo and Les Miserables were both inspired from this book. And I read The Count of Monte Cristo last year, and I read this through the new year. And I don't want to spend too much time in noticing comparisons and things like that, but there are, and it was great fun. One example is that in The Mysteries of Paris, there's a poor little girl that's mistreated, and her name is Songbird. And then in Les Miserables, we have a poor little girl that's mistreated. Her name is Cosette, but she has a nickname, the Lark. So, of these three books, Les Miserables is the biggest. And I don't know, I don't mean by page count. I think The Mysteries of Paris is probably longer by page count. But this is 1,300 pages, and it's probably more accurate to say that it's 10,000 pages that have been crammed into 1,300. This book is a universe. It's a world of its own. It contains an entire world of knowledge. The understanding, the research and study that Victor Hugo certainly must have dedicated so much of his life to is on stage, full display, completely uninhibited, unhinged, unedited. Just he throws everything at you. His understanding of religion and science, the arts, philosophy, history, all of the poets that he mentions, all of the historical figures that he mentions, just on every page, it's just scattershot with unbelievable amounts of knowledge. Now, I would say that the first portion of this book, meeting the bishop and all of the things going on with the bishop, the first interaction with the bishop and Jean Valjean, our main character we follow throughout this, was in prison for 17 or 18 years for stealing a loaf of bread, famously. I would say that's probably my favorite portion of writing by Victor Hugo. Toilers of the Sea, I think, is still my favorite book of his. And there are, for as grand and as great as this book is, I'm going to do my very best attempt to talk about some of my takeaways. I'm not going to spend too much time going through the whole plot, which is also enormous, of course. For as grand as this book is, it does also carry with it as much criticism as fanfare. And the two main points of criticism, which I think are worth addressing, is the uninhibited, unedited nature of this book, its length, and in particular, all of the digressions. Uh, I'll say at the end of part one, um, ending with the bishop, which I think is so satisfying, so the narrative is so well put together. We go into part two, which begins with a historical record of the Battle of Waterloo, and it's a 50-page long essay. And if you're reading this for the first time, or even multiple times, it just strikes you as, what on earth am I reading now? And throughout the rest of the book, from part two onward, the digressions just start slowly taking over the room. It feels like it's more digression than actual plot. And I think that's the wrong way to approach this book, as a novel with digressions that take you away from the extraordinary characters and plot, thinking like, I want to get back to the story. Why am I in Waterloo for so long? What's the point of this? And I was just talking to someone yesterday. The actual digression of this book is the plot. All the stuff that Victor Hugo thinks is important to talk about, whether it's Waterloo or the history of convents, or famously the Parisian sewer system. That's what he's bringing to the table. His wealth of knowledge and his opinions on these things, his judgments on them, his view of ethics, morals that relate to all of the topics that he brings up. Because Victor Hugo has a lot to say, and he is very opinionated. And I think a better way of approaching the book is actually you're reading Victor Hugo, the person, and he's very much a character in this book. He's the omniscient figure that is front and center, unavoidable throughout the entire book. And you're spending time with him, and he's being very, very generous with his time. You could, I imagine, cut out half of this book. You could take away probably 600 pages and not affect the actual plot beats of the story, and read it and not miss anything that had happened. And it really could have. There might be abridged versions of this that are out there. I haven't looked. It very well may make it a better novel, but it certainly wouldn't make it a greater book. The digressions are fascinating, and now, having 20 years since I first read it till now, and lived with this book, and have had my own experiences, there's a great satisfaction in whatever small percentage of picking up on allusions. So it mentions at one point Diogenes is referenced with his lamp, and there's a footnote for this. This book has a really great critical apparatus, by the way. Footnotes and endnotes, and a really good introduction. But those little moments where I know who Juvenal is, or Horace, or Virgil, and I've read these things, and it really adds a lot to all of the wealth of knowledge that is in this book, and the little bit of knowledge that I've been chipping away at myself outside of this book. The other criticism of it that was given of its day, and now to some extent, is the unlikeliness of the characters. I mean, they're not realistic or natural portrayals. I think Flaubert had said that these characters are just mouthpieces for Victor Hugo to expound on all the things that he wants to talk about. And that's very much true. These aren't naturalistic or realistic characters. But it is a criticism of something that this book didn't set out to do, which I feel like makes it an unfair or strange criticism. I liken it to the Greek stage plays, and how strange it would be to read the Orchestra and complain that they're not realistic, natural depictions of actual human beings. They're not. They're bigger than regular, normal human beings. These are they are pieces in a puzzle for Victor Hugo to expound on his worldview. Now, I do think that the book does have its own flaws, which the two main things I think one or two maybe I'll bring up is the wild coincidences that happen in this book. Just outrageous coincidences of characters just constantly bumping into one another. Jean Valjean, although he is looking for Cosette at this moment that I'm thinking about, he's going to rescue her after Fantine had died. And he just bumps into her in the woods. The person that he's looking for, he's alone walking through the woods at night, and he bumps into a little girl carrying a bucket, and she goes, "Oh, I'm Cosette," and he's thunderstruck or whatever. That happens with all these characters throughout the whole book. And I think there could have been some edges smoothed over to make those pieces more believable. The other, I don't know if it's a criticism, but a piece of the book, a plot device that was so repetitive, it just really got on my nerves. And Jean Valjean, throughout the book, takes on many identities. So he's Jean Valjean when he gets out of prison, and the priest buys his soul. He goes to a little town and starts a factory, becomes the mayor, and he's Monsieur Madeleine. That's where he meets Fantine. That's where he saves the guy that got stuck under the carriage. That's where Javert saw him do it and recognizes that, or reminded him of someone that was in the prison yard, that is now broken parole and needs to be taken into custody. But it goes on from there, and he takes on another identity, and there are so many of these scenes where there'll be a mysterious figure or a new character. Somebody saves a person that's about to fall off a boat, or there's a mysterious figure that was burying treasure in the woods, and so on and so forth. And constantly, the book would go on and say, this figure is none other than Jean Valjean. It's like, yeah, of course it was Jean Valjean. And it happens too many times. It could also be fatigue, because that was a plot device also repetitively used through The Mysteries of Paris and The Count of Monte Cristo. I do want to talk about some of my favorite portions of the book. Although I do feel like the thrilling, suspenseful events or episodes that happen where Jean Valjean is cornered and nearly caught, I do find that maybe that's not his strongest suit in this book. But the moral conflicts in book one, he's at the end of the book one, he's made a life for himself. He's going towards a path of redemption. He's successful. He's the mayor. The town loves him. And Javert accuses him of being this ex-prisoner. And he goes off and finds, no, they've actually caught the prisoner. He comes back and confesses this to Jean Valjean, Monsieur Madeleine. And he finds himself in this moral predicament. He could say nothing and have his life, but there's a man that's now going to be condemned to a life in prison. Or he could turn himself in. And the drama that Victor Hugo creates with just a man alone in his room with his thoughts about what should I do? What is the right thing to do? And he gives it all up. He goes to this other town and identifies himself as the prisoner, so the other person can be released. But it's this wonderful philosophical dialogue. Again, this happens after the fantastical barricade scene. Cosette and Marius get married, and Jean Valjean, Monsieur Leblanc, is a changed man. This little girl that he's been taking care of her whole life, is now happy, loved, loving. She has the father that she loves, a young husband, a loving family. And it's at the very end of the book, we again find Jean Valjean with this moral conflict. Again, he's alone in a room, thinking about what he should do. And he goes to Marius, his son-in-law, and confesses that he's an ex-convict. And Marius is saying, why? Why are you telling me this? And he says, because it's the truth. Just high emotional drama. When Marius finds out from the villainous Thandier, or however you say that, the innkeeper, who's like this ridiculous villain throughout this book, finds out that he really did make these hundreds of thousands of francs by hard work and creating this town, that he's been taking care of Cosette, that he actually saved Marius's life after being wounded in the battlefield, trudging through the sewer system, that he in fact didn't murder a man, but he actually saved a man, that he didn't shoot Javert. He let him go. It's just crushingly beautiful. Um, I'll talk about one of what I thought was one of the very weakest parts of the book, and then one of my favorite. And the weakest is the moment where throughout this book we have the walls coming down on Jean Valjean and Javert, hot on his heels, and all the other characters. By the way, there's hundreds of characters in this book that all have these moments. Many of these characters will have a moment. There's a young, pitiful young girl who is a side character that, while she's dying, says to Marius that she loved her. And just in a flash, this character that we've just been seeing in the background has a whole interior life. But anyway, I'm digressing. There's a situation where Marius knows that his neighbors, the innkeepers, I can't pronounce their names, are planning an ambush on Jean Valjean. He's going to be coming back later in the day to give them some money. The innkeeper realizes that this is the father of Cosette that took him, that he sold to earlier in the book. He gets all these robbers and scoundrels together, and they're going to ambush him when he gets back. Marius hears all this and goes to the police station. Says all this to the police commissioner. This is what's going to happen. And it's one of the most ridiculous parts in the book. It's unbelievable. A guy just walks off the street, goes into a police station, says all of this. The police officer's decision, he says, okay, I'm going to be there at the appointed time. Here is a gun that I'm giving you. Go back to the apartment right when all of the action is going to happen. Police officers telling this to this guy, I want you to shoot the gun in the apartment to be my signal to come in and stop everything. It doesn't play out that way, but he doesn't actually shoot the gun. He has his own kind of conflict with the innkeeper who he believed was a war hero. Utterly ridiculous. One of my favorite scenes, just for the sake of sense of humor, again, we have this ridiculous scene where it's the middle of the night, and Javert and rank and file police officers are chasing around Jean Valjean and Cosette, and it's so pitch black, dark, that you can't see the hand in front of your face. And they're on a street where Jean Valjean is cornered. He's got to take care of this little girl. The police officers are scurrying around. They know that he can't escape anywhere, and he's cornered. Doesn't know what to do. It's just ridiculous. These characters right next to each other, moving past and not seeing each other. Jean Valjean goes across the street. He gets the rope from the gas lamp or something, goes back over, creates a pulley system, is able to hoist the both of them over the wall, and they find themselves in the garden of a convent. And they find a little hut. Cosette is freezing to death. Jean Valjean is looking at this little girl and realizing, like, I need to get her next to a fire now. She's ice cold blue, and she's gonna die if I can't get her to a fire. The police are still after him outside of the wall. He doesn't know how to get back over the wall. He's in the middle of nowhere, and he hears a little bell. And he goes outside, and there's a man there. He runs up to the man and says, I'll give you 5,000 francs if I can get this little girl into a fire right now. And the guy turns around, and he goes, Monsieur Madeleine! And again, this is one of those ridiculous coincidences, but in this case, I thought it worked really well. And he's taken aback. He hasn't heard that name in a long time. And he says, "Well, who are you?" And it's the man that he saved that had the wagon crushing on him, and Jean Valjean, Monsieur Madeleine, lifted it up. So they have a connection. Jean Valjean actually was able to get him that position as the gardener in this convent. But all of this stuff's going on, all this drama, all this suspense. It's a race against time. Cosette's gonna die. And Jean Valjean goes, "What are you doing here?" And I can't remember his name. The gardener looks at him and goes, "Covering the melons." And Jean Valjean goes, "What?" He goes, "Well, there's a frost, and I want to protect the melons, so I'm going around covering the melons." And I just find that so entertaining. What are you doing here? All this high stakes, covering the melons. Wonderful, just wonderful. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. There's a lot. This book is a lot. I'll end by saying this is a book that would be very hard for me to recommend to someone. If someone said I want a great big historical novel or something, it would be low on my list. Honestly, this is a book that I would personally recommend if someone said to me, I read The Hunchback of Notre Dame and I loved it. And then I read The Toilers of the Sea and I loved it. And I read The Laughing Man and kind of liked it. Well, then, it's obviously obvious. You like Victor Hugo's company. And it's a bigger book, and you're going to get more of his company. I suppose if someone had read the Mysteries of Paris and The Count of Monte Cristo and was interested in those kind of connections, maybe I would recommend that as well. Or a great forewarning about what you're getting into with this book. It's not a normal novel. It's a library. And I after finishing this, I have a little bit of a feeling of achievement. I feel really good that I got through it again. I read every day, and I didn't feel an achievement in the same way when I finished this, but I did. I know I didn't talk about the whole of the plot and all of the characters. I feel like if someone was watching this kind of video, they probably have already read the book, or even if you're interested in the book, the plot is pretty famous, so I didn't think it was worth going into that. Les Miserables by Victor Hugo. It's a book where you just spend a whole lot of time with a person that knows a lot and has a lot of opinions. So thank you. Let me know if you've read it. Let me know how I did talking about this book. I was a little nervous even sitting here, no notes, no script, no edit. I'm going to sit here and talk about Les Miserables. But I did it. This is my video. Let me know if you've read it. Let me know how I did. Please leave a comment if you would like. Thank you, and take care.